In the aftermath of a fragile Gaza ceasefire, Israel has intensified its military operations in the occupied West Bank, particularly targeting the Jenin refugee camp. This escalation has led to significant civilian displacement and international concern over the use of unlawful lethal force. The recent death of a 2-year-old Palestinian girl during an Israeli raid has further heightened tensions. Simultaneously, the release of 200 Palestinian prisoners has been met with widespread celebrations, even as the United Nations warns of a deteriorating situation in the region. I'm Henny Saif. Let's get in focus. The Independent has reported that the fragile ceasefire in Gaza has brought a glimmer of hope. Yet, the West Bank faces escalating violence, particularly in Jenin. Israeli forces have launched a large-scale military operation, targeted militants, but displacing nearly half of Jenin's residents. Bombings and destruction have left civilians fleeing for safety, raising fears of a broader conflict in the region. Under the right-wing Israeli government, settlement expansion and intensified military actions have deepened tensions. Human rights groups and the UN warn that the use of excessive force threatens to unravel the fragile peace achieved in Gaza. Meanwhile, settler violence in areas like Funduk and Jinsfort exacerbates the crisis. With displacement and insecurity spreading, the West Bank stands on the brink of further devastation as the risk of widespread violence looms. And to provide more analysis on the most recent updates concerning the current crisis in the West Bank, we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Mohammed Osman, the International Relations Specialist. Dr. Osman, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Sir, how does the escalation in Jenin signify a shift in Israel's strategy within the West Bank?
Well, thank you, Hani, for having me first. The most recent escalation in Jenin, with the current ongoing raid over there carried out by the Israeli Army of Occupation, comes as an escalation of an existing conflict in the West Bank that started on the 11th of October 2023, a few days after the 7th of October. The Israeli Army of Occupation started carrying out security operations against what they would call Palestinian militants or armed individuals. And of course, the Israelis have used these pretexts in order to limit movement in the West Bank, prevent any action or popular mobilization that might be undertaken in solidarity with their fellow Palestinians in Gaza, and also in order to use them as a cover to undertake more and more violations in terms of displacements and illegal land acquisitions that are carried out by Israeli settlers and the Israeli government itself against the Palestinian people in the West Bank, which is recognized as part of the state of Palestine and is treated by international law and the United Nations as an occupied territory. So what's happening now in Jenin is a proto-Gaza operation that is taking place in the West Bank. A very significant escalation. Its timing raises questions because it comes directly after the enforcement of, as you said, a very fragile ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. It seems that the Israelis were allowed to carry out this operation by the Trump administration as a compensation for their pause or temporary halt of the war in Gaza, and also for Netanyahu to keep his government intact without all of the ultra right-wing elements walking out of the government. Being fair, already walked out of the government. Now, what's one of the things that is keeping Smotrich and his religious Zionist nationalist party in this operation that is going on in Jenin. And of course, this operation could escalate substantially, which means that we might see a much larger conflict in the West Bank if the current rate of violence persists.
And do you think, sir, that this crackdown in Jenin will impact the ceasefire in Gaza?
Of course, it will have its ramifications and its effects on Gaza. It will only heighten the tensions because some of the people that are targeted in Jenin are members of Hamas in the West Bank and other resistance Palestinian factions that maintain a certain presence in several camps in the West Bank, like Jenin, like Tul Karam, like Balata, and also in the towns of Nablus and whatnot. However, so it might impact that directly, but I think that the dangers posed to the ceasefire in Gaza are not as much related to the developments going on in the West Bank as much as they are related to Israel's will to adhere and abide by the provisions of the ceasefire agreement, as we are seeing now in Gaza, with them today denying that the residents of northern Gaza to return to their homes because under the pretext of the delay of the release of one of the Israeli detainees, Arbil, whatever, I can't remember her last name even. So that is the situation in Gaza. However, any escalation within the Palestinian territories will affect the state of the ceasefire in Gaza, definitely.
Well, the UN expressed alarm over the excessive force in the West Bank. What does that reveal about the situation on the ground, and should it prompt any international response?
Well, the UN did express concern. Many countries around the world have deplored Israel's behavior. However, it will never go beyond that because Israel enjoys complete immunity and impunity provided by the United States, whether the previous Biden administration or the current Trump administration. So that is not a question that will have any different answers anytime soon. It will always have, it had the same answers for the past 70 years, and I think it will have the same answer for the next 70 years, unfortunately. However, with what's going on in the West Bank right now, the humanitarian situation in Jenin specifically is quite concerning because right now they are targeting the refugee camp with warplanes and with heavy equipment. And they have destroyed roads, they have destroyed homes, they have demolished homes using explosives, they have destroyed medical facilities and have vandalized hospitals and destroyed ambulances and fire trucks. So these are trends of behavior that we have seen before in Gaza. And that's why I told you it's a proto-Gaza operation what's going on in Jenin. So if they are testing the grounds and they are seeing whether they can actually expand this operation further in order to cause a massive humanitarian crisis inside the West Bank, with the goal maybe even of displacing the Palestinians from parts of the West Bank to other parts inside the West Bank or even beyond. And this is a very dangerous indication of what lies ahead and of what the Israelis are planning, Hani.
Dr. Osman, what are the implications of the increased settlement expansion on the prospects of peace in the West Bank? Is it only complicating it even more?
It will be to the complete detriment of the peace process. It will be detrimental for the peace process. It will be just another death sentence to the peace process. I think that the idea of settlement creates a permanent situation on the ground where the lands of the Palestinians are illegally acquired and de facto annexed, and the Palestinians are ethnically cleansed out of their own lands. Right now, around 25 to 30% of the lands in the territories of the West Bank have been acquired by Israeli settlers, and the expansion of settlements under the tutelage and the patronage of the Israeli government, the current government, of course, with U.S. support, it seems, is quite concerning, especially that the United States under Trump, one of his first executive orders was to lift sanctions on illegal settlers, several illegal settlers in the West Bank and in the occupied Palestinian territories. So this is a very dangerous indication. This means that they will expand the settlements further, and they will also keep gradually and slowly displacing Palestinians from their historical ancestral lands in the West Bank. So, of course, how can we speak of peace or a sustainable peace or a just peace or even any kind of peace with such a situation transpiring on the ground, Henny?
Mm-hmm. Well, what about the return of the freed Palestinian prisoners? Do you think it will shift the balance of power or tension in the West Bank?
No, not really. And probably they will rearrest them in a few months. So the short answer to that, Henny, because I don't think it will have any effect on that. Yes, some leaders of the Palestinian resistance, whether from Fatah or from other factions, were released in the last batch. Not all of them returned to the West Bank or Gaza even. Many of them were not even allowed back into Palestine, and they had to be deported from the Israeli prisons to Egypt, and now they will go to a third country, most likely in order to permanently settle there. They are not allowed back into the occupied territories by Israel's illegal occupation authority. So I think they will have substantial effect. I know that people tend to exaggerate the effect and the impact of the release of many of the Palestinian prisoners. This brings us joy and happiness, of course, to see those people who spent decades, some of them decades in prison, due to them exercising their legitimate right to resisting illegal occupation, and this is provided to them and guaranteed to them by international law. However, at the same time, I do not see that this will have any substantial game-changing impact on the situation inside the West Bank or Gaza.
Dr. Mohammed Osman, the International Relations Specialist, thank you very much, sir, for your insights. And turning to Eastern Europe, Belarus is at a pivotal moment as it holds its presidential election today. President Alexander Lukashenko is widely expected to secure a seventh term amid allegations of electoral manipulation and repression. This election has sparked a global debate about democracy in Belarus, with international observers closely monitoring the process and its implications for both the country and the region. And a report by First Post highlights the growing global concerns about Belarus's electoral process. This comes amid widespread allegations of fraud and repression, with the opposition figures exiled or imprisoned and independent media silenced. The European Parliament has called this election a sham, emphasizing concerns about human rights and democracy. While Lukashenko's remarks underline the regime's confidence in its governance model, they also underscore the ongoing divide between Belarus and the international community regarding democratic standards. And to provide more analysis on this story, we're joined by Dr. Sergei Markov, a former advisor to President Vladimir Putin and a distinguished Russian political analyst. Dr. Markov, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. How, sir, would you describe the significance of this election for Belarus' domestic and international positioning?
I think this election not so much important, because it will be seven presidential term of Alexander Lukashenko. It was absolutely clear that Alexander Lukashenko would win. You know, I know him personally. We have complicated relations. One time, Alexander Lukashenko even expelled me from Belarus. And that time he'd been in conflict with Vladimir Putin. It was the reason of why Alexander Lukashenko expelled it. But after this, we had also a period of good relationship and so on. And he is very strong. And in fact, Belarus in situation when a war is firing around Belarus. No, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, it's part of the big Russia. And it's a very difficult situation for Belarus when Ukraine, which in fact occupied by Western countries, is in situation of war against Russia. But it's not just brother nations. It's just the people, one nation in the 1,000 history. And it's what? First, second important point is that after absolutely catastrophic situation in Ukraine, because nobody in Belarus want to follow Ukrainian way and to support some anti-Russian politicians. And also in 2020, yes, we had some kind of revolt which can be organized by Poland for withdrawing of Alexander Lukashenko. And Alexander Lukashenko took Kalashnikov gun, and he stayed as a real hero, and that's why he expressed his very strong political will. And after this, he not only won, he also suppressed all pro-Western opposition in Belarus. In fact, it means that now opposition in Belarus are only theoretical. In fact, most of the competitors to Alexander Lukashenko, in fact, part of his team. But it's not because Lukashenko not supported those people. It's because Belarus is very close to the war.
Mm. Well, President Lukashenko referred to Belarus as a brutal democracy. How should this statement be interpreted in the context of the current criticism as the European Parliament and other international bodies have condemned the election? Do you think that this could lead to greater political or economic isolation for Belarus?
I don't think that this election quite competitive. As I mentioned, Belarus in situation of hybrid war of Western countries against Russia and against Belarus as a Russian ally. Alexander Lukashenko, he's like Churchill during the war. That's why no free and competitive elections, but nevertheless, Alexander Lukashenko are fully supported by majority of the nation.
Mm-hmm. Sir, what role does Russia play in supporting Belarus' current administration amidst these allegations of repression? And what do you think would be the international response regarding these elections, especially from the European Union and the United States?
I'm sure that United States and the European Union condemn this election as not free and fair, but Belarusians regard this position of European Union, United States, is part of the hybrid war against them. And everybody understands that Western countries want Belarus to be like Ukraine. It means to be captured by Western countries and to make Belarus enemy of Russia and to make Belarus the field for battle against Russia, the field of war. It's what the Belarusians doesn't want. And Russia made conclusion from situation in Ukraine. Russia made very big mistake when Russian President Putin didn't send Russian troops to Ukraine in 2014 for the protecting Ukraine from the coup and, in fact, political occupation by Western intelligence service. And now Russia has political will. If some kind of revolt, military revolt, in Belarus will happen as it happened in Ukraine 2014, Russia for sure would send its troops to protect Belarus from aggression of Western countries.
Dr. Markov, now reports of ongoing repression include over 1,250 political prisoners. They have raised human rights concerns. What does this indicate about Belarus's future, and with the limited opposition and controlled media landscape, is there any space for democratic reform in Belarus?
There are space for democratic reform. Belarus, we're talking about, not Belarus. It's exactly Western name of Belarus. And Belarus will go the democratic way by small liberal reforms, and not in kind of what Western want, because freedom in Belarus much more bigger than in Ukraine. And there are a lot of political prisoners in Belarus, but more or less political prisoners in Belarus compared with Ukraine. So the situation during the war, there are no democracy could be, and people understand this. But if the relation between Russia and Western countries will be normalized, I think Belarus, step by step, very carefully will move to the more competitive election and to more liberation of the political prisoners and to the more freedom of media.
So, what broader implications do these elections have for Belarus's relations with the neighboring countries and global powers like NATO and Russia?
You forget about China.
And
because
China.
for Belarus, the main supporters is Russia and China as well. And Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has very friendly relations with head of China Xi, and Russia and China support Alexander Lukashenko and support stability in Belarus and support anti-Western policy of Belarus. As to the another neighboring country like Poland and Lithuania, they regard Belarus as aggressors who want to capture power in Belarus and who want to make neo-colony from Belarus. And Poland is the main engine of this process. Poland has a geopolitical project, which called Intermarium, which means that it should be some kind of confederation, which should include Poland, Lithuania, Poland control Ukraine, and Poland control Belarus. And this should make Poland as great power of the Europe. The Russians know very well about this plan. It's not secret. It's published openly. That's why Belarus regard such neighbors as Poland and American control Ukraine and Lithuania as enemies and aggressors.
Mm-hmm. One final question, Dr. Markov. Now, how do you foresee or expect Belarus to navigate the international criticism it faces while maintaining its current political structure?
Belarus wants to improve relations with Western countries and most of all with European countries. Also because Belarus get a lot of funding, subsidies, investment from China, because China used Belarus during many years as some kind of place for the economic activity in European Union economic zone. So Belarus would like to improve such relations, but now Belarus has no any suggestion of cooperation with Western countries, but only ultimatum: you should be neo-colony, you should be enemy of Russia, and we want to have own your territory. This, of course, what Belarus strongly denied. As to Russia, Belarus wants to get support from Russia, but now Russia don't want to take part in the Ukrainian war because everybody could see catastrophic results of such a war. It's also important characteristic of Belarusian leaders.
Dr. Sergei Markov, thank you very much, sir, for your insights on Belarus's elections and their regional and global implications. And as we've seen today, the world is grappling with the pressing challenges from the escalating humanitarian crisis in the West Bank to the political complexities in Belarus. These stories reflect the delicate balance between governance, human rights, and international diplomacy. We will continue to bring you the latest updates from the Middle East and around the world, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for this episode of In Focus. I'm Henny Saif. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.